Every man lives. Not every man truly dies.
Grandpapa Nurgle wants you to play with my darling. It's over there on the shelf. Welcome to Nurgle's garden.
There's a really unpleasant clash of associations going on there.
Can I sit on the other side of the room with the Slaneshis, please?
Yeah, I was going to say, even as a Slanesh worshipper, I'm a little bit put out by that.
Orcutulus.
It was the deep, throaty growl that did it, Adam.
Orcutulus Slimax says,
Welcome to the Fluffenhammer. How are we all doing, my little chickadee?
Oh, I'm fine here. Again, every time we do this damn podcast, I'm distracted by something, because every single time we do it, Games Workshop has come out with something new and lovely.
Yes.
In this instance, I've had very expensive, just ridiculously so. I mean, I've got in my hands the collector's edition of the Death Guard Codex, and I'm just looking at all of the heavy metal pages, particularly the one with Mortarion on it. And I'm thinking, no, I can't buy that. And the Death Shroud Terminators, and Typhus, and the Blight Lord Terminators, and the Tallyman, and the Plague Surgeon, and no.
Yet the tone of your voice suggests you're already defeated.
Yes, that's absolutely true. Well, that's how Nurgle works, Dave. That's how Nurgle works. He grinds you down. He grinds you down until you've got absolutely no choice in the matter, and then you have to declare for him, and that's how he gets his worshippers, you see. So I think that's what's happening. I think that's exactly what this codex is designed to do. It's so lovely, and all the miniatures of the way they're photographed are so gorgeous that you just stare at them forever and think, I actually don't think I'll be able to live unless I have those.
well, after all, isn't capitalism the greatest plague of them all?
Oh dear. I'm not even going to get into that. I have enough of that in general on my Facebook page and whatnot. People with socialist friends arguing with libertarian friends and anarchist friends arguing with liberal friends and whatnot. It's like I bow out of that.
Yeah, but on the other hand, I'm pretending to be a plague demon that rides a giant caterpillar snail. So I think I win.
That's true.
Yeah.
I think that's an automatic win, that one. And that's fine. I can deal with that.
Yeah, that Games Workshop, if you ever do, Horticulus Slimax. If you ever want him in one of your audiobooks,
I'm more than happy to turn up.
Yeah, Nurgle's Gardener. What a great concept that is.
Rot. Don't talk to me about rot.
I like the fact that he's an absolute curmudgeon. He's amazing. Anyhow.
Yeah.
Right.
He's kind of avuncular,
Oh,
isn't
yeah,
he?
yeah.
You know, he's kind of like the crotchety old uncle.
The only thing that he actually likes is his big snail creature. That everything else in Nurgle's doing. Hang on a sec, I do actually have the White Wall book here.
Oh, you've got that book.
Oh, yeah.
Excellent. We're coming at this from two angles.
Oh.
Nurgle in Warhammer 40,000 and Nurgle in AOS. That's great.
So let me just try and find it. So it actually says here, Horticulus's unpleasant disposition and almost complete lack of humour is well known. Amongst the Nurglings, he is often referred to as Old Sour Seed. Only the most reckless mites call this to his face, however, as they soon will find themselves dangled as bait for Horticulus's slimy mount. This snail-like monstrosity is called Mulch, and is one of the few creatures in the realms whose presence the Grand Cultivator can always tolerate. This is because Mulch is as every bit curmudgeonly as his master. The snail beast is always ready with a sardonic snort or guttural sigh, and devours any nurgling incautious enough to stray within reach.
That's great. I love it. I absolutely love it. That's the kind of little detail that they're throwing into the Nurgle miniatures and their background at the moment that I absolutely love. In fact, I when we do our discussions of whatever bit of fluff that we like a bit later, Adam, there's a detail very like that in something that I want to talk about too.
And I've just realised 5 minutes in, we haven't actually done the introductions, so let's get this show actually rolling. Hello, everybody. It is me, Gruffy, your host for episode of the Fluffenhammer, and with me, as always, is my bad traveller, who will take you through the hellish hellscapes of the realm of chaos, with a smile upon his face and a twinkle in his eye.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and as you've no doubt guessed, I've taken a little leave of absence from the circles of Slaanesh for this one. I've been drawn into the festering garden of Nurgle for a little while, just for a sojourn. I won't be staying there forever, but yeah, it's like a little holiday. It's like a festering little holiday. Do you think there is actually maybe like a plague bearer or a great unclean one who acts like a tour guide?
Well, I'm thinking the gardens of Nurgle Butlins, to be honest with you.
That would fit, actually. That
it's
like the whole ethos of Butlins. Nurglings, yeah, perfect. And the whole ethos of Butlins fits really well with a realm that's designed to induce despair.
I think it works quite nicely. Welcome, I'm your green coat. I say green coat. It's just leprosy.
Yeah, can't remove it or anything. You know, it's sort of like it's sutured to their skin by year worth of hideous lesions and seepages and whatnot.
Itchy, scratchy, tasty. And that voice you heard there was, of course, the man who we have tried multiple times to have on the show, and it's either not been able to happen, or the recording has vanished into the abyss. It is Dave Mence. Hello, Mr. Mence.
Technology hates me. It follows me around playing jokes on me.
Well, if it happens again, you know, I'm just going to assume that the Chaos Gods don't want it to happen.
I'm more thinking, have you got the weirdest of Terminator happening, where Terminators are coming back through time and playing practical jokes, not trying to kill you. Pull my finger.
Deleting my files when I'm not around.
God, that would make for... It saps the epicness from them a little bit, doesn't it? It really saps the threat from them if that's what they're doing. You know...
Smell my flower!
If you'd come back from the future to torment someone, moving their keys and deleting their files would be the best way of doing it.
Actually, in any real-life terms, yes, it would. That would drive them slowly insane and would actually probably be much more painful and sadistic than just shooting them outright.
Absolutely.
I've stolen all of your left-hand shoes. Your washing
I have
machine.
all of your pen lids.
I've just placed all your washing machines on whites only. And they're colored. Nah.
I've always wanted to do a Necron that's sort of like the Terminator, maybe a flayed one or something like that, that's got half of Arnie's face on it.
That would be amazing.
Considering that basically like the Necrons are just Terminator in 40k.
Yeah, they're also... Have I ever told the story of why I hate the Necrons? And it's not the Necrons' fault.
No.
Right, so... Woolworths, about 1994, 1995, yeah, that kind of time.
This is starting like a granddad story.
Oh yes. One second.
Let me tell you about Necrons.
Oh.
It was Woolworths in 1984.
Oh, when I were a lad, there was this shop called Woolworths. You could go in and buy a pick and mix and a Lamborghini and have enough money to get a Big Mac on the way home. Mid-90s anyhow. Woolworths had a load of Space Crusade and Space Crusade Dreadnought. They had them for half price. So I went in and I bought like 4 or 5 copies of both. Because they were dirt cheap. They were,
As you do.
like $10 each. Not at the same time. I bought them like every other weekend, just go in like, how many have you got left, right? There's still the same amount as there was last week. I'll buy another copy of the game and expansion pack, Elder Attack was in there as well. So I built up this like android army with the Chaos Dreadnoughts. I was thinking, I wonder how I can make this into a army, because that would look quite cool. These robots just travelling along, having the dreadnoughts backing them up and all that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And finished painting all of them, So there's probably about 100 androids, 7 of the dreadnoughts on each. The original dreadnought and then the mission dreadnought. And then White Dwarf drops with the Necrons.
I remember the exact one.
And I'll stare at it for a little while. And I'm not overly happy, because as much as I have now just built myself a nice little Necron force, this was my idea, and get out my house, Games Workshop.
Yeah, I remember that exact one, and I remember feeling really weird about it, because that was one of the first times that a new race, like a totally new race, had been introduced into 40k for years and years and years.
It was the first new race.
The closest.
It was the first new race since Rogue Trader.
I mean, the closest. Yeah, because the closest I can think of is the Tyranids.
Yeah.
And they've been at least around in some form or another, like the Gene Stealers and the Zotes and whatnot. For a while. They've been in the background since the beginning, really, in one way, shape, or form. The Necrons were totally new. They just dropped. And I love the way they introduced them as well. They were like experimenting with them. They were a free miniature on the front of White Dwarf, like a lead miniature with a big spiky gun, which inevitably you would prick your finger on or something.
Oh, yes.
And I think there were only like 2 or 3 units in the entire army.
Yes.
The entire army.
There wasn't many.
You just had Necron Warriors, Scarabs, and I think you had the Necron Lord.
The Destroyer as well.
And the Destroyer, the old version of the Destroyer that looked like a land speeder. Yeah. Just like a big block of metal with very little else.
That's exactly what it was, to be honest with you.
Yeah. And they were hideous. I remember even with just that very limited repertoire of units, they were hideous. They dropped like a nuclear bomb in the 40k universe because of those Gorse weapons.
Yeah.
That back then they could destroy like the biggest tanks in the game.
They had that weird scale creep thing that just keeps happening, where the newest race is the most powerful. And then you start to realise it actually isn't, because there are ways and means around it. You just need to play against that army a couple of times. But
although back then, in second ed, that was king of that. The army creep. It was king.
Was it second ed that Necrons came out? Was it third? No, it would have been second, wouldn't it? Yeah.
It was second. Yeah, it was second ed. It was sort of like towards the tail end.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Second.
That's frightening, isn't it, to think that. Anyhow, right. Enough nostalgia. Let's have some nostalgia.
Touche.
Mr. Dave, there's a question.
Hello.
Sorry, I'm doing this completely wrong, aren't I? Mr. All you have to do is yourself to Slaanesh.
I'm in. Where do I sign?
There you go. Easily enough.
Oh.
And the thing is, Slaanesh isn't picky either.
No.
Like some of the Chaos Gods.
What are you suggesting?
Get in Slaanesh's bag, Dave. You're one of us now.
Yeah, it's a case of get your coat, you fools. Slaanesh is a little bit easy in that regard, I have to say.
Slaanesh is odd as well, because it's like completely against all of my collecting, all of my nerddom, all of that sort of stuff has always generally been about good guys. And then when I started really learning, once I got into the miniatures, you can't help but get into who the miniatures are. It's very difficult to paint something with life and emotion and movement and not understand who they are. And when you read who people are and why they are and why they do the things that they do, the things that I would normally like, and the things that I would stuff like, normally I'd be like, ooh, I don't want to be a bad guy. The thought of being covered in slime with tentacles all over the place and the third eye, and I'm just like, oh, it sounds like quite good fun.
It sounds like fun, doesn't it? Yes.
Yep.
Sign me up.
Yep. I can hold another gun with my extra tentacle. Brilliant.
I can have weapons fused into my tentacles as they wave around, firing wildly.
It's just like so much more interesting than the good guy stuff. It's just so there's so much more dimension to it.
What I'm going to do
is
at some point I'm going to.
Sorry, go on.
Sorry, I think we've got a little bit of a lag here, unfortunately. What I'm going to do at some point, Mence, is if I create a champion of chaos in any way, I shall name him Mence the Marauder, and I shall have him have guns coming out of his face. Just like 2 little gun barrels coming out of his eyes and one coming out of his mouth.
I want to see that miniature.
Obliterator. Great. That sounds like the old Obliterator miniatures.
Yeah, Oblitermints. There we go.
Obliterate, that's great. A Mensulator.
As long as I get my share, do what you want.
Well,
Do I get to paint the model?
yeah, okay, then if I build it, if I can sculpt a face with guns come out of it, I'll send it to you for painting, and then you can have yourself in miniature with gun face.
I'm telling you, Adam, seek out the original Obliterator models. They literally have guns coming out of their mouths and their eyes.
Do as well, don't they? That could save time.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of buying something and sculpting it, I'll just send Dave a link to an eBay.
Yeah. Yes, paint this correctly.
To buy this, Dave, then paint
to
it, then keep it.
Yeah, to be fair, those miniatures are shit.
They are.
They're really terrible.
Yeah, the Obliterator model's no good. Ugh.
No, for some reason they've never got them right,
No,
have they?
no.
Despite being a fantastic concept, just the most fun concept that they've ever introduced into Chaos are the Obliterators, but they've never quite nailed them miniatures wise.
No, they've always kind of came across as... The best way to describe it is, they are to what the Obliterator should be, as that original Nagash miniature was to Nagash.
Oh God, I'm not sure. I think on balance, I would prefer the existing Obliterators miniatures to the old Nagash model, because the clown. Yeah. I mean, not even a scary clown like Pennywise. No, just silly, stupid, undead clown with its big bishop's hat. No,
I gotta admit,
did not work.
I still love that original Nagash. It's freaking ridiculous.
For its comic
Oh, yeah,
value,
yeah.
ironically.
Oh no, there's nothing ironic about it. I love it because it's bloody stupid. Yeah.
Because
I'm not looking at it going,
yes.
look at that, isn't that crap? I love it because look at it. In the same way that, like, I love Action Masters. They're tat, I love them to bits. There's no irony.
That's just sadism, that is.
It's just...
It is, isn't it? There is a masochistic element to that, Adam.
Well, it's where, Snarl can no longer turn into a dinosaur, but instead he walks around with a little guy who's a gun who does turn into a dinosaur just to annoy him.
Yeah. it's the kind of thing, isn't it? Where it's the kind of concept where you want to be a fly on the wall in the board meeting to see what kind of discussion goes on when they option it.
And then you realise that there's no discussion, it's just 5 people sitting there counting money. Yeah, do whatever.
Yeah.
Do whatever. Yeah, that's fine.
Whatever, yeah. I mean, it was something like that, wasn't it, with the Nagash miniature, insofar as I'm aware. That head that it's got, the ridiculous skull face, was not meant to be the finished head.
No, it wasn't. He did it for...
There was another one, wasn't there?
He did it with that head as a joke just to try and shut them up. Because they were trying... whoever was in charge at the time was just being stupid about the design choices. So he just kind of went out and out. And then the guy... He thought he was going to turn around and go, no, don't do that. He just went, brilliant, let's put it out.
Brilliant.
Leaving the sculptor just going,
absolute brilliant.
No. No, it's not. Please stop. Oh God, it's on shelves.
Yeah, people are buying this. This is the supreme lord of the undead. This is the god of black magic in the old world. And he looks like... You can't even call him Pennywise because he's not that scary. No. He's ridiculous.
I think, if memory serves me right, somebody actually called him Santa Nagash in my old wargaming club. And they actually moulded him with a big beard and then painted his hat and clothes red with white trims. It actually looked really good.
Absolutely brilliant. That might actually make it marginally more threatening.
Trust me when I say that the Santa skeleton's coming at you was a little bit scary.
The thing is, the worst of it was he was badass back then.
Yeah, he kicked your ass.
He could fight bloodthirsters like one-on-one and kill them. If he cast like Hand of Dust at them or something, as it was back then, they would die. They would just crumble to dust and that'd be the end of them.
I always remember being in a game with somebody who, his necromancer cast Van Hell's Dance Macabre on Nagash. And I just sitting there as this giant thing just moved across half the board towards me. I don't want to do this anymore.
No, you didn't. I mean, as stupid as the silly clown was, you didn't want it anywhere near your lines.
No, because once that thing started hitting you, that you knew about it.
Do you remember they back in like yonks ago, and I mean absolute yonks ago, sort of towards the tail end of Second Ed 40k, they did in White Dwarf they did this massive clash of all of the big special characters in Warhammer as was.
Yes, I do.
And the ones who came out on top were they threw in one wild card, which was a Bloodthirster, which isn't a character per se, but it's so bad. It was so badass back in the day that it could kill most of the characters anyway.
Yeah.
And the ones who got to the end were Archaon, as in the original Archaon.
Yeah.
You know, the very, very first miniature of Archaon, which was dreadful.
Not saying anything about any current Archaons. Not that he's improved any.
And the Bloodthirster. And in the end, it came down to a clash between Nagash and the Bloodthirster. And the Bloodthirster killed him. So the best character in Warhammer As was not even a character, it was a Bloodthirster.
It's about right, isn't it?
It's about right, yeah. It's actually, I mean, with AOS now, they fixed that a little bit. They fixed that, because now Nagash could kill a Bloodthirster, like, easily.
Well, yeah.
Easily.
Right now, Nagash is the most ridiculous thing in the world. And
He's great.
I've seen it.
I love him.
I've seen him go. I haven't actually played against him yet, but I've seen him go. And
it's fun. What you want, and one of the most fun things you can ever do, actually, is just sit opposite someone who just takes Nagash and let them have pretty much free reign with the summoning, and it's game over. It's game over. But it is lots of fun trying to see how much you can chuck at him, how much he can take. It's a lot. Yeah. It's a ridiculous amount of punishment.
I think we need to get a moving, because I've just realised that we're just sitting here just spiralling around conversations and not actually getting into the stuff that we want to talk about this episode. So, 20 minutes in, welcome to the show. We are now a third through an episode of Friends. Talking about chaos and ruinous powers. Courtney Cox, more tentacles than you'd think. So, Dave. Dave.
What would that be? The Chaos God of Banality, maybe?
No, that's Timmy Mallet. Timmy Mallet. Courtney Cox, I think, is he.
Malletus.
Yeah, Malletus. Courtney Cox. I'm not calling her Cox in the stats. No.
No, that's Slaanesh again.
Yeah.
That's just an aspect of Slaanesh.
Yeah, but there we go. Courtney Cox is just the American aspect of Slaanesh.
Fair enough.
I think that works quite nicely. The less said about Ross Geller, the best. Right, so...
I just had an image of Courtney Cox as a Keeper of Secrets, actually. That could potentially work.
It's the horns, isn't it? She just works on the crab claws.
That and the bovine face, yeah.
We're sorry, Courtney Cox, if you ever listen to this show. Imagine if Courtney Cox is a massive Age of Sigmar fan and just starts listening to this. And this is the first
Wouldn't that be great if, like, up until this point, she's absolutely loved the Fluffenhammer. She thinks it's great. But now she's going to demonize us forever and ever.
Yeah, she's going to go around telling all her Hollywood friends, don't listen to that Fluffenhammer. They said I was bovine. I don't even know what that means.
She's sat at home now going, I was in the Scream, don't you know? Don't you know I am?
You know who I am. I nearly died 4 times in Scream. I'm the survivor.
And look, my Tomb King's army isn't even ready anymore. It doesn't exist. Spent all of my Hollywood money on buying a Tomb King's army, and you call me bovine.
Oh man!
Moving on.
What are we talking about?
Well, I don't know.
This
is what I like about this podcast.
Is chaos. This is chaos, isn't it? The embodiment of.
The embodiment.
We've gone down a really weird path here, and I don't know how to get back out of it. So, Dave, there's a question that I like to ask everybody who turns up on this show, and we like to get a little bit of discussion out. And that question is, for the time that you are with, could you tell us about how you got into the worlds of Games Workshop, what those worlds mean to you, and all the things that you enjoy doing whilst dwelling inside those worlds?
Having good parents. Honestly, really, having good parents. My parents had a very nice loft which they converted and built a gaming table upstairs.
Oh, right, okay.
Where we had green. It was quite a big table. It was a good sort of 5x4 table where we'd made loads of polystyrene that we glued together with PVA glue and painted it all up green and flopped the table. And then we had a special place in the corner where you could paint miniatures. And we were both, I would have been 13 or so. My brother would have been 10, maybe 11. And we used to go up into the loft and play miniatures because we used to just catch the bus to Games Workshop after school from time to time because I love the miniatures and Scott loved the games. So that worked out quite well because I would paint Scott's miniatures and he would go out and demolish people at the games because he was really, really good at it.
That is brilliant.
So
yeah, parents, which is good. As far as I got into it in the first place, I'm just generally a fan of anything, even vaguely alien, robot, stroke, small action figure. So even though I wasn't into the games that much, the lore and it's the artwork as well. When you look at the original, what was it? Space Hulk.
Yes. Good old Wayne England.
The first, I still have a picture that I drew of. Do you remember when Space Hulk came out and all the original artwork? There's a Blood Angels Terminator leaning out of a door shooting one of those miniguns.
Yes, I
can't remember
do.
what it's actually called. I drew that, and I still have that on paper to this day, even when I was like 14, 15 years old. The artwork got me into it specifically because Space Marines and Terminators, and back then there was quite a lot of just generally disturbing images in massively fine detail, in pencil, in double-page spreads, and then you turn over it and it was more words. And my brother would be all excited at one bit, and I'd be looking at these pictures for hours, just picking out tiny little grotesque little monsters that are, just sitting in someone's pocket in a back pouch somewhere with a horn sticking out and dribble out of his mouth. And so it really pleased the sort of nerdy side and the art side of me all at once.
Would you say that you'd be able to pick out any of the artists that you saw back then?
Not in the slightest.
That's a shame. So what I was going to ask you there was...
so there are... if you were to show me some of the popular images from back then maybe a few. But mainly it was all the old Terminator artwork that used to come on... because I used to read my brother's White Dwarf back then, and we are talking exactly the time when the Terminator Captain came out, who had that beautiful red shoulder, but with that sort of blue-purple mottled effect on his...
yes!
Which I actually bought recently. I bought a great big job lot of useless tat just to get one complete old Terminator Sergeant in metal, which I've stripped back, so it's seriously clean metal now, so I can start painting it again. Just for exactly the same reason as I started collecting Transformers, is because there's something about that one miniature that physically captures a moment in time for me. That makes me feel, as soon as I hold it in my hands, I go back to catching the bus to Games Workshop after school because they stayed open till 8 o'clock at night. And just coming home with a blister pack with 2 Terminators in for $5.99, thinking I was the richest man in the world. Just little things like that. And to come back to it again now has massively rekindled the fire for a lot of the other nerdy things in my life because the more comfortable you are with being nerdy and the more in love you are with nerdiness, spawns you on to do all the other things that fringe it.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Totally. And what you were just saying there, Dave, about having like that particular miniature that arouses associations for you, that seems to be something that happens so much. We hear that story all the time, don't we, Adam?
Oh yeah.
It seems to be something that's universal. It's a universal experience. There is that one image or that one miniature that people remember from childhood. They remember seeing in White Dwarf. They remember picking up, and that being it, that being the gateway. For me, it was the Elder Warwalker, the original Elder Warwalker.
What I'd give for one of those again now.
Oh, God, yeah.
A son of a bitch to put together. Big spindly metal legs and that tiny little stubby metal body.
But if you cut
get
your
it
teeth...
together.
Sorry.
So go ahead.
Well, if you cut your teeth back in the day when you had metal miniatures that didn't go together, what people put up with today is nothing. If you could survive back then, you are a masterpiece.
Absolutely. My God. I mean, those miniatures, when you had like the very big, tall metal miniatures that had vast, vast components like the Warwalker, like the Space Marine Dreadnought or whatever, and you had to sit there for hours, and it was for hours filing the bastards down because they always used to have like flash on them that would prevent them from going together properly, and you had to sit there, and then you'd realize you hadn't got the right glue, for them.
Yes.
That you'd got the plastic glue or something like that, which is why you'd been sitting there for the last 3 hours and nothing had been holding together properly. Yeah, that was an annealing experience. That is it's a learning experience, especially if you like to convert your miniatures, because that meant getting saws and files and clamps and drills and things out.
Because in White Dwarf, all it says is, pin the arm to the body. And it's like, oh, that's such an easy thing to do. But what that really means is going to your dad and saying to your dad, Dad, I'd like a drill, please. And your dad turns around to you and says, you're 11, Dave. What do you want with a drill? It's like, well, I've got this little tiny miniature man, so I'm going to take this drill bit at 11 years old, and I'm going to press really hard into this tiny bit of metal until it slips and goes in my hand. At which point Dad would go, yeah, right, then, here you go, and pass me a drill, and pass me a drill bit. And it really was living on the edge back then. Modelling back then was different to what it is now.
It was a dangerous thing, wasn't it? You know, it was a dangerous thing. It actually required, I mean, health and safety would have a nightmare, wouldn't they?
I remember to this day my brother's voice on a Sunday morning as he would scream down the loft hatch, because we'd be in the loft where the gaming table was, going, Mum, Dave's glued his hands together again. Trying to climb down the ladder with two hands stuck together because I've just exploded super glue that had dried at the top, and all of a sudden it's just gone all over the place.
Yeah, or getting woozy from using like the inappropriate silicone-based glue that you found in your dad's shed or something.
Yeah. Now that having a loft meant there was no ventilation. Not even open a window, there was no ventilation. So being sort of pre-teens and using a spray can in a sealed area led to some interesting conversations.
I can imagine. I bet you saw the hidden secrets of the universe in a very sort of Philip K. Dick way.
And the odd migraine.
Have I ever told the Imperial Rhino story on the show?
No.
Don't think so. No.
If I have, then I apologise, but I'll tell the story again now. So, aged maybe 12, 13, we've been to the opening of the Carlisle store. Travelled the 40 miles to Carlisle and the 40 miles back to Worthington afterwards, and I've bought myself a Imperial Rhino, amongst other things. It wasn't the only thing I bought. So I had the original plastic Rhino. Do you remember that one?
Oh, God, yeah.
So I had that for my Space Marine Army at the time. I'd also bought a Snotlim pump wagon, which was metal. It's important to remember that this was metal. And what was the other thing I bought? There was something else about I can't remember what it was, but that's not important for the story. So, late that night, this Friday, it'll be Saturday night, listening to Atlantic 252 till the early hours, polystyrene cementing this Rhino together. An idea forms in my head, and I think it's because I've been working at this for a while, ideas are just coming to me. So I decided that instead of having a Rhino, to try and turn the Rhino into an extension of the Snotlim pump wagon.
Of course.
So, by 4 o'clock in the morning, I have a mess, I have a destroyed Rhino, and, as I realise now, I am off my fucking face on polystyrene cement. And I know this because during the night, my mother comes downstairs and just goes, "What are you doing in there? The house stinks of glue." Because I have used up an entire bottle of polystyrene cement in about 6 hours straight, without a break. My mum says
feeling good.
My eyes were like giant irises, and woo.
Were you seeing sort of like, insects on the floor or on the walls out of the corner of your eye and that sort of thing?
Same night, I started hacking away some old cardboard buildings for Warhammer Fantasy to try and make the bunker that I'd got out of White Dwarf. Just trying to get the shapes right, and nothing was gluing together right, so I just had these like Warhammer Fantasy buildings without roofs anymore,
Kids don't know what it is to have spirit-based stuff anymore. Everything's acrylic. They don't understand the struggle.
Yeah, apparently I just look like a cat on catnip. Just ding, big eyes.
Yeah. The best thing is it's like when you don't understand this stuff. You have no idea. You don't know. You don't know you're going to get high off the stuff if you don't like open a window or go outside for an hour or two. And B, you don't understand that certain types of glue won't bond certain types of material. Also, certain types of glue will melt
Yeah.
certain kinds of material. I've done that a couple of times, using the silicon-based glue on a plastic miniature and not understanding why it's dissolved the arm off of
Yep.
it.
Did anyone ever do the, you build some really nice scenery out of polystyrene and then pour super glue onto it?
Yeah.
Oh.
But have you ever noticed that it's particularly hypnotic if you watch
It really is.
Yes.
corrosive materials on polystyrene?
Yeah.
It's a beautiful, beautiful dance of corrosion just going on in front of you. Yeah, I've got quite
So
high
it-
just spraying stuff only to watch it disappear in front of me.
Yeah, the problem when I was doing that was when I was off my face on polystyrene cement. So, hey man.
In for a penny.
And then all of a sudden the hill started to melt, man.
As
those pink elephants over
narcotic
there.
stories go, as narcotic stories go, it's a very geeky one, and I love it very much.
Yeah, well.
Slanesh would approve, most definitely.
But sorry, we went off the beaten track there. So you had your childhood of Games Workshop and, wandering around and doing all the stuff in the attic and getting off your face on various glues and silicone-based products. So what is it that brought you back now as an adult?
Everything that Transformers doesn't. Because if you're listening to this and don't know that I'm a Transformers fan, I'd be quite surprised. I would have thought it's quite crossing over. But everything that Games Workshop offers me loads of stuff that Transformers doesn't.
Okay.
Because it has beautiful art and grotesque stuff. And really, I've got really bored. Okay, start from the beginning. I bought Space Marines. I bought the 3-pack of Space Marines because Games Workshop, as hideous as they are, the conglomerate beast that they be, have beautiful front windows.
They do, yeah.
They all have, and if you were as a child, if you used to paint miniatures, I dare you to walk by a Games Workshop window and not walk past and go, I had one of those.
Yeah.
It's just addictive. You can't help it. They've got the most beautifully painted actual statues. They're not even game pieces anymore. They've transcended that somehow to just being actual pieces of art. And it drew me in. I couldn't help it. And I said to Emily, who said, so what got me back into it is Emily said that she liked Tyranids and that she used to have a Tyranid army and that she'd be quite interested in painting some Tyranids again. And the moment she said to me, painting, I instantly just went, oh my god, do you want to buy a house together? This sounds amazing. Yeah, I know, weird. So we agreed that we would have a painting party because a friend of mine has a Necron army. So he brought his Necrons round, and I bought that little 3-pack of Ultramarines, and Emily bought 8,000 Tyranids. They don't cost anything, do they? You get 10 million Tyranids to one Space Marine. And we bought enough paint to sort of make do. We bought the base colours of everything and some very cheap brushes, and all three of us sat around for hours. And the housemate that lives here has got a massive, great big box of Warhammer, literally from the day, all metal figures with all his old Blood Bowl stuff.
Lovely.
Yeah, so we just got like 20-odd miniatures in a massive, great big pile with loads of paint all over the place and towels and paper everywhere so we don't make a mess, and painted for about 6 hours. And the funny thing is the other two don't paint at all anymore, and it turned on the on switch in my brain that just went, this is what you've been missing, Dave. And I just haven't been able to stop since. I haven't been able to stop since.
Brilliant.
I think the longest I've gone without painting anything was about 2 weeks. And at the end of 2 weeks, I just went, no, I can't do it anymore. I've got to
be done.
Because it's just so therapeutic.
It really is. It really is.
And
It's so...
because Go on, George, sorry.
I mean, no. I mean, for me, it's because I write. It's the perfect come down from that. It is the perfect come down. Both the modelling part, the converting part, and the painting. When you've been you're in that kind of alpha state, that particular state where you're imagining constantly and everything's very quick and it's all coming very, very quickly. It's very intense. There is nothing like it. There is nothing like just snipping the miniatures off their sprues, getting the green stuff out, getting the paints out, and just mindlessly sitting there and focusing on this one thing that's totally inconsequential, that means nothing to anyone, and making it beautiful. Just letting it go, making it beautiful. There is nothing like it.
It's that bit that I live for.
Yeah.
It's making it beautiful. Literally. I get an empty grey model and I get to sit there. And part of the reason why I started painting in the first place is because I was painting a lot of spaceships, i.e. Vipers from Battlestar Galactica, the USS Enterprise, things that are supposed to look a certain way.
Yeah.
Which is great, because after a while you get the technique of what you're doing down, and you can make things look like they're supposed to look. In maybe a year's practice, you get good enough that it looks like the thing that it was supposed to be, just a miniature version. And that's brilliant. I was proud of myself. But what I lost is, brushwork, because everything you do with an airbrush is quite clinical and it requires taping up and it requires patience. But as long as you do the process properly, it's very difficult to cock it up because it's block colours. And I really wanted to get into expressionism. So the first thing I did is try and accurately paint ultramarines, which was the most boring thing in the world, because for the 5 minutes it was just like, this is amazing, I've got a brush and I've got water and this is like danger painting. I can make a mess right now and I get told off and I feel it's like exciting and a little bit sexy. And I got really into it, and then I realised that really holding on dearly to the doctrine that Games Workshop have evoked for a specific chapter or a specific model got really boring really quickly, and it cost me a goddamn fortune to realise that, unfortunately, because by the time you've bought like some Space Marines and realised they don't look like the ones in the magazine, so the half-finished ones that you leave at home stay there, and you go out and buy some new ones because the new ones will look much nicer, and then the new ones kind of just look like the old ones but with a much more expensive miniature. I went through a fair few miniatures before I realised I'm not enjoying any of this. I'm just going to paint something ridiculous. So I bought a Terminator box and painted one bright pink and one bright green and one bright blue, and just painted obscene, hideous colours, because I wanted to understand how the colours worked. I wanted to understand how they blended into each other. I was sick and tired of painting white and grey, so I just went and bought grotesque colours, and I painted everything.
Sounds like, at heart you were a Chaos player from the very beginning, Dave. You were just waiting for it to come out.
You might be right.
It does sound that way, because those colours that you just cited there, pink, green and blue, that would be Slaanesh, Nurgle and Zeech, pal. You only need the red, and then you've got the full set.
Chuck in a little bit of purple and some dirty washes, and
absolutely, you've got some Chaos miniatures there.
Yeah,
as long as it's bruised purple.
The irony was, when I painted stuff that wasn't Games Workshop, I still bought tanks and things like that so I could rust them all up. I wanted everything to look like it was 30 years old. In the miniature that I did this weekend for the competition tomorrow, one of the things in that is old enough that the flesh on the skull has rotted off and the skull's just laying on the floor. And that's the most interesting bit of the whole diorama for me, because I got to paint old, decayed muck. Which isn't easy. I feel it's quite easy now because you just dry brush stuff. But if you were to give it to someone who's new to painting and say, make this look 10 years old, they wouldn't know how to do it. And that is the quintessential reason. Well,
that is the fun of it, isn't it? I mean, it's the fact that the universe is so open that you really can stamp your own personal preconceptions onto the miniatures. I mean, there are people out there for whom it is their principal creative expression, and the miniatures they produce in terms of the converting and the painting are sublime. They are just beautiful to look at. And what's more, they make them their own. They make them something very unique, where they're not sort of copied from the pages of White Dwarf or whatever. They are their own things. They've come up with their own particular schemes that are characterful and redolent of the background, but work and are entirely their own.
Well, I didn't really understand. I'd seen it lots, but didn't understand it. So Emily and I went to Games Workshop for the afternoon because they had Simon Peterson. They had a Golden Demon winner in the shop for the afternoon.
Oh, right.
Just painting. And you could go along and talk to him.
Oh,
and
that's
we went
brilliant.
in there, and it was like the bloody Mary Celeste. No one was talking to him, and this poor guy's just sat there all on his own painting these miniatures. And when I went up and looked at what he was painting, they were They were Poxwalkers before the box set came out.
Right. So the zombie things. Yeah.
I didn't know what they were. It didn't make any difference to me. When I look back at the photos now, I'm like, oh my God, if people had known what was there, they would have lost their shit. But
Yeah.
he was doing stuff that wasn't just I'm painting a miniature, but he was using actual inks to paint on top of white because paint is too thick and doesn't give him the finesse that he needs. He was using blood for the blood god and a little tiny bit of transparent red Tamiya paint mixed in with Yoo-hoo glue and then applied on around the lips using a tiny pin because it dried in a translucent manner and made it look like drool and blood was coming out down the chin. And you could actually make strings in the original Alien when they used KY jelly to make of the alien. Well, he was recreating that actual big strings that dried hard enough that you could put it in your carry case with all your 50 million other poxwalkers because they're probably cheap to have and not worth anything. But you could get all this gore and stuff that was what woke me up to the things that I could do instead of just going ultramarines have 3 different color blues on them, and if you just dry brush it and paint in the middle it'll look nice, and it's like let's go.
Absolutely. I mean, I've got a lot of respect for the people who can do that, you know, who can sit and paint like the entire chapter's worth of the ultramarines in one sitting or whatever, and there are people who can do that, who have done that sort of thing, and it's like props, mad props. I don't know how you do it without going mad, but well done.
Well, they're mad, quite clearly.
Yeah, clearly.
That's why I've gone for the character models these days. So as much as it sounds a lot of money to spend 15, 18, 20 pound on one figure, you can spend an awful lot of time painting one figure and make it look absolutely amazing as opposed
and
to
getting your 40, 60, 70, sometimes 80 pounds worth of joy out of it, you know?
Well, that's a conversation I've been having quite a lot recently with people who said that, I don't understand why you've got into the Games Workshop stuff. It's really expensive. And then I think, well, it is, but it isn't when you think about time that you use, time per pound, for want of a better term. We all have had a history with the Transformers franchise. Think about the last time you bought a Transformers action figure, right? Round about 20 quid, I assume?
Yes.
Well, actually, the ones I bought were a little bit more expensive than that, but...
Yeah, I was about to say that.
Yeah.
Such elitist pigs.
But how much time did you spend with that figure? Did it get transformed a couple of times and put onto the shelf?
Pretty much.
3/4 of an hour.
Yeah.
Whereas I bought a £20 Chaplin and it took me 2 weeks and 2 days to get into the state that I wanted it. So
yeah.
It's a fair point. It's an absolutely fair point. It's all relative, isn't it? It's all relative. It depends on what you take joy from, how you derive joy from what you spend your money on.
From saying that, I'm not saying that people who buy action figures are stupid at all. I'm not, because I love my action figures as well. It's just something that I lost a lot of steam with of late. But this is the point I'm making, that it is expensive if you think of it as being something that you buy and then you put on the shelf. But it's something that you buy, you build, you paint, and then for most people it's you play the games with. I've got a £16 Auric Mega Boss, which it took me 5 days to paint. Probably about 2 days to clean up and put together, so that's a week. It has been out for maybe 20 games at this point. If I start putting that as...
This is the main difference, isn't it, between, say, buying Warhammer 40,000 miniatures and Transformers or any other action figure. There is an investment involved that's beyond the monetary. There's an abstract quality to it. There is a creative element to it, and it's not just the painting and converting and the putting together. It's also the imaginative aspect. You can weave stories around these miniatures. You can invest them with character, and they become ciphers for imagination, which is what is, you really do need to, you need to be of a very particular mindset, I think, to get the most out of them. And that is, you need to have a fairly active imagination. Once you do that, once they become ciphers for story, they become so much more than just bits of plastic that you buy.
I mean, I've told the story before about my Auric shaman who has managed to kill loads of enemy characters with the foot of Gork. Like, first turn, smash, smash, smash. And every time he does it, I paint another foot on him. Because he's just this freaking monster when he doesn't get it off every time, but when he gets it off, chances are that character is dead. It's insane how well that works.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Because, sorry Dave, off you go.
No, go on. Well, when I start doing it again, Do you want to dance? Is it me or you?
I don't mind either way. This is how the background itself has developed. I mean, if you look back at the history of a lot of the established characters, of a lot of the even some of the established armies, like the subsects of the different armies, they actually derive from people who have some connection within the company running with an idea. Idea that they came up with maybe for a particular game, for a particular storyline, and it develops and it waxes and it evolves and it becomes established, it becomes something more.
It's funny you should say that, but I painted a Primaris Space Marine in Deathwing colours. So it was bone armour, green eagle on the chest, all of that sort of stuff. And I'd actually made up my own little story. Everything I paint has got its own little story in my head. Because without having a goal towards, I can't paint something unless I know who he is, what his name is, why he's there. Okay, I think a lot of arty people are going to be like that, but you need to create a narrative in your head before you can go ahead. And it was when I put the narrative on the Fluffenhammer that it was Stu Dark Ages that actually piped up and said, everything that you're discussing already exists, and linked me to a Space Marine chapter that had everything that I was looking for. And that made my day, because now if I'm ever going to make a little group of Space Marines, I know exactly where I want them to go, because they already have my heart, so to speak, because I know who they are and why they're doing it.
It's a lovely
connection.
Shoot
them from stuff that I've already got.
Yeah, and it's a lovely connection.
It's lore that got me going again. It's the one thing that I've never got into with transforming robots. I don't care about the lore. Not that I don't care about it. It's not my thing. It's not my focus. But in Games Workshop, there's so much stuff to take on board. There's so much stuff to learn. Gulliman Blue. You buy a bottle of Gulliman Blue paint, and all of a sudden there's a man called Gulliman, and he's got a really nice miniature. So then you start looking into, who is Gulliman? What's he been doing? And then you start looking back at the stuff from back in the day that I never cared about what it was. It was a nice model to paint, and it had nice pictures. But when you what's the big Nurgle guy with horns and a big mouth in his belly, but he's massive. He sits like a Buddha.
Oh, the Great Unclean One.
Yes. Okay.
That's the Great Unclean One.
Well,
Greater Demon of Nurgle.
Yeah, you start looking at stuff like that, and you think, mine's like that. And something that I've never done ever before with any of my other nerdy type things, I've really started to do my homework on who people are, why have they got that colour. One of the things I enjoyed about listening to the Right Honourable Mr. Grufflock talk about the Deathwing book, is I started to equate the models that I was painting to people in the universe. People in canon. I'm making the next thing I do is a diorama of two heads talking and a Gene Stealer. Okay, the standard that I've just done. I've got it in my head. I've got a lot of the parts that I need to do it. I just need to get on and do it. But the moment I heard about two heads talking, going off on his own just to explore where they were, what was going on, and he encounters one Gene Stealer, and it's a much more visceral picture in my mind, listening to one Terminator fight one Gene Stealer and the genuine terror that goes through a Space Marine's mind, because it's the number one bad guy for the Space Marines. When that book was made, they quite clearly said that that's what it was. So to take that from the days of playing Space Hulk, from playing 40k, from sitting up in the loft in 40-degree heat, because that's where we were comfortable with a tape measure, measuring out 40 to see if my Cyclone Rhino that I had could for, all that sort of stuff. It just to put not a picture to a face, but to put an emotion to a model and connect those two. It just ignited this massive let's go and learn lots of stuff. It's for 6 months now. I just sat and read lots of things that because I've never really read before. And this is the most I've ever actually read things, is just being interested in how to do stuff, why stuff is the way it is, learning why their armour is bone white, for example, because they're specific, not just Dark Angels. Things like that are magic. Just magic. And and the people who write this stuff are so good at it too. And I can see why kids are into it, because it's gothic and it's expressive, and it's especially right now, because I must admit a lot of the kids in the world have gone a bit emo. It's good. We're on point for that sort of thing. it's like 10 years worth of fiction has just gone, right, now's the time. Look, we're going to pick out this 8th edition. We're going to attack all the sort of miserable emo kids sitting at home. And we're just going to give them paintbrushes and some paint and make them play Warhammer. And it just seems to have worked. It just seems massive at the moment. Whether that's because I'm really interested on it or because the gravity of what they've built has sort of dragged me in. But one way or the other, I'm really enjoying it. And if I never play a game and just read all of the fiction, then I will be more than happy.
I think you're absolutely right, Dave, because it is exploding at the moment. It's not just because you've just come into it. It is so interesting at the moment. It's so engaging because they're doing so much. The books that are coming out of the Black Library, like the actual novels and short story collections, there was a time when they were okay, they were fun, they were diverting, but they were always very pulpy, and most of them were not that brilliantly written. They were fine. They were just good fun. The stuff that's been churning out lately, by and large, is excellent. It's really good, solid, well economically written, pulpy science fiction fun, but it enhances the universe so massively. So massively. One of the big Kickstarters for the current status of 40k in particular has got to be the Horus Heresy novels. It's got to be, because it lends so much weight. Like miniatures like Magnus the Red, Guilliman, and Mortarion. When you read the Horus Heresy novels, you know who these guys are. Not only have they been alive for like 10,000 odd years, but in that 10,000 odd years, they've done so much, and it lends them this weight and this gravitas. It makes you feel slightly intimidated by the miniatures, actually, because you want them to be right. You want them to evoke this sense of age and of malevolence and of power. I think that is largely it. They have somehow managed to once again capture that lightning in the bottle. They've snared the cultural zeitgeist. They've measured the mood of culture, and they've looked at their market and thought, right, how are we going to snare them again? How are we going to get them in? How are we going to get people reading this stuff again? And therefore buying the miniatures that go with the fictional characters. And they've done it.
It's quite a central universe as well. Everything leads into everything. And I must admit, whether it is clever marketing or whether it's me dancing around the outskirts of it and slowly working my way towards the middle, but it's difficult to get into Space Marines without wondering about Death Guard. And then once you look into Death Guard, it's difficult not to sit there and look at a lot of the other stuff that sort of dances around the edge of that, because you get into Chaos Marines, you get into your Plague stuff, and the questions lead to questions because everything's connected beautifully. It makes anyone who's even remotely inquisitive really suddenly start to perk up their attention and go, well, I've looked at this thing, but look at all these other shiny things that I can look at too.
That is absolutely the case. I mean, that's how most of us got into it, really, as kids. It's the fact that, you read something in the first White Dwarf that you ever pick up, some little bit of fluff or something, and you become fascinated by it. And suddenly you go and buy a codex, and in the codex there's this other bit of background that relates over to this other army or this other force or part of the background. And then you go and get more books, and it just cascades and cascades. And there's so much. The universe, and not just the Warhammer 40,000 universe, but the old world from Fantasy Battle, the AOS realms. There is so much to get your teeth into, and you will always find something new, no matter how saturated you become by it. There's always something, maybe stuff that's been lost, maybe stuff that's not officially part of the lore anymore, or that's just not been mentioned for years and years and years. And the fact that they're continually adding to it as well. Especially now with the new editions of the games out there, one of the things they're concentrating on so much now is moving it on, so that people who are saturated with the lore have something new to get their teeth into. It's a great time. It's a very inspiring time to be part of the hobby.
I think their shops have backed off a bit as well.
Yes.
Yes.
I think the marketing message, I know for a fact, without saying too much, because I just know people that have accounts to sell this stuff and that sort of thing.
Yes.
But their marketing message is, if you go into a Games Workshop, you can expect to be assaulted by someone who looks like they should be riding a skateboard in a blue t-shirt going, "Hi, can I sell you something today?" But if you go to a lot of the subsidiaries that they've now issued licenses to sell Games Workshop to, they have taken on board quite heavily that the very hard sell only pushes people away. And if you're a mum with 2 kids and you have to go into Games Workshop and say, "Hi, I want some Grey Knight Terminators," and they say to you, "Well, we don't have any Grey Knight Terminators, but we've got these Space Wolves ones, or we got these Blood Angels ones are nice. Do you want these?" Of course, you get home and the kids go, "That's not the right thing.
I don't want it." Yeah, yes, it's not the right one.
The sales staff just want you to go away with something. And I think that is less and less. I think they are being forced to do that less and less, because screwing someone the first time means you don't get the client back.
Absolutely. Well, it sets up a negative association immediately, doesn't it? You know?
Yeah.
And yes, you will not get repeat customer out of that. And I think probably all of us, and I think anyone listening to this who is a Games Workshop fan, has probably got, if not one, multiple stories of being driven away from a particular Games Workshop because someone A, wouldn't leave them alone, and B, just didn't have the panache. You know, there is a certain art to salesmanship, isn't there? You know, which is where you make yourself available, but you don't impose. You don't sort of violate people's body space. You don't talk over them. You don't try to force them to buy what they don't want to buy.
I had this exact conversation with one of the staff in Games Workshop because they said, when I was in there buying some paint after they knew that they well and truly I'd got the lurgy and the poison was at Games Workshop and I had to go and get my fix, and he said, he jokingly said, "You didn't want to talk to me at all that day." And I said to him, "Well, in the nicest possible way, you smelt like you just smoked 15,000 fags," and then came right up to my face and said, would you like anything? Buy things. And we had a really honest conversation about the fact that he was just pretty much driven to doing that because they do have, for just people who were paid average wages and work in a shop that sells small toys, they have very serious sales targets and stuff like that. But the irony is at the start I couldn't see why he worked there for love nor money, because he was just an annoying little groat until the day I got to hear him play with some of the people in the shop, and he narrated games on the shop game tables for 8-year-olds that just wanted a little bit of a go. So he threw a couple of dice for them on a Saturday afternoon. He narrated games, what was going on, what happened, did someone die, did they die horribly, or did they... He literally narrated the deaths, the moves, the missiles flying through the sky.
Brilliant.
He brought games to life in an amazing way. And instantly, as soon as I heard him do it, I just thought, I know why you're here. I completely know why you're shit at this end of it, but at this end of it, you're absolutely magnificent. I have lots of respect for you. And now he's the one who's actually organising the competition that we're doing tomorrow, and I've spoken to him a million times. Because you need to see someone at work sometimes. You need seeing someone enjoy their job is brilliant. Doesn't matter what it is. It's so rare in this world as well. To see someone really enjoy why they do something is great. But yes, he was amazing. The way he narrates, he just absolutely brought stuff to light. It really makes me want to do it, if I'm honest. So it's working, whatever it is.
That's so what you need, isn't it? But it needs to be earnest as well, doesn't it? It doesn't need to be someone practicing sales spiel at you. It needs to be someone who genuinely loves what they do. And he's going to come at you not like, oh, buy this, buy this. They're going to be like, I collect these. What do you collect? And, what's your army? Oh, man, we've got new stuff for this force if you're interested. If not, what you're looking for, that kind of thing. But they need to have a genuine passion. It needs to be genuine, because you can sniff out when it's false, so easily. When it rings false, when it's just salesman's spiel, and it just turns you off. It makes you want to leave.
But I don't think you could work at a Games Workshop unless you were in it.
No. I mean, how could you? I mean, the questions you'd get asked, for one thing, and not just about like rules and stuff like that, which you could be taught. You can be taught to like repeat rules by rote, even if you don't know what you're talking about. But stuff like the background. Someone might come in and ask you, so is the Emperor dead or what? you know, and and if you didn't know this stuff, you'd be like, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. But if you know, even if you're into it, then it's an interesting thing. It's an interesting thing to start a conversation about.
Yes. Like, I didn't know, in fact, to take your example, I didn't know if the Emperor was dead or not.
Nobody
and it was
knows
all a
if
bit.
the Emperor's dead or not at the minute.
Isn't there a story that he came back and then sort of pseudo proved that he was at least sort of omnipotent or everlasting or something? Anyway, right? The moral is, I went in there and I said, well, I don't know, this is bloody stupid to me. And it was the manager of the Southampton Games Workshop he was so good at painting, it just drives me crazy. He's really annoying because he's quite good looking for a bloke as well, and he's sort of my age, and it's like, oh, you're good looking, you know loads about stuff, you're really effervescent with the stuff. I've got a man crush on you, 100%. I'm coming back in tomorrow. And he told me all about the Emperor and all about what the Emperor was when I was into it when I was 15, and what the Emperor is now. And it's little things like that, by knowing your craft, that makes idiots like me come back over and over and over and over and over again, spending all my money.
Yeah, it's hooks, isn't it? You know, if you can drip little narrative hooks to people that might interest them, you are going to get them with something. You're definitely going to snare interest, even if it is by accident, just by dropping things naturally into a conversation. You're going to get them, but you need to know it. You need to know it, and you need to be able to communicate it in such a way that you sort of effervesce about it. You know, your passion, it sort of fills the room. It becomes infectious.
So he tells you all about stuff that you didn't care before, and you go home and tell people that don't care all about stuff that you want them to. Exactly
that. And suddenly people start caring because you're passionate about it.
Listen to my story.
Hey, that's what I do to my YouTube channel every day.
It's like genuine mystery and stuff. We don't know if the Emperor of Mankind is dead or not. I love it. And what I also like is what it sounds like to people who don't know this stuff and are not interested in it. I'm endlessly fascinated by that because it happens a lot. I noticed at TF Nation this year, the Transformers convention that we attend, that I think we did it a couple of times, didn't we, Adam?
We did. We really did.
About Games Workshop related stuff, and there were people sitting around who were not into Games Workshop related stuff, and the blank looks were fantastic, absolutely fantastic. It was a case of having to turn and sort of acknowledge the fact that there were other people present every so often.
Sorry.
Yeah, exactly that. Apologizing for getting a little bit nerdy and a little bit geeky and a little bit, maybe a little bit too into it, you know?
I don't know. The same way, though, seeing the other people walking around and talking about the thing that they got excited about. Yeah, it's different strokes for different folks.
Absolutely, it
you
is.
You never apologise for your nerdiness.
No, not at all. I mean, it's not the nerdiness I would be apologising for. It's excluding people from the conversation from a highly esoteric subject. You know?
Yeah, that's an entirely different thing. You know, that's being socially awkward and quite nasty.
Yes.
You know.
But it is nice. I mean, it's one of the things I like about this hobby, that there is a certain crossover. You know, you can go to conventions and whatnot, and odds on you'll find somebody who is a Warhammer or Warhammer 40,000 fan if you're at a nerdy sort of science fiction event, and you can talk to them. You can have a chat about stuff.
Yeah. I mean, that's what you should always do that to everyone. You have a shared interest. Talk to them. You may not like the person afterwards, but at least you've tried. You know?
I mean, it is something I like about Games Workshop in particular, that you can have conversations about it, because the lore, not only the hobby aspect, but the lore is so deep and so interesting. It does excite a degree of communication that perhaps you wouldn't find in some other sort of science fiction or nerdy cultures, which I like a lot, and it requires a degree of communication as well.
It's true.
One of the best things. Sorry.
I was going to say, it's true, the Robert Heinlein fans do not have a tendency of talking to each other very well. Mostly they're just sitting there in very smart suits with little hats with skulls on. It's quite frightening, actually. Yeah.
My favourite bit of all of it is all of the people of a certain age will sit there and sort of turn their nose up while you're talking Space Marines and stuff like that, pretending they're not listening. And then 2 minutes later, when no one's looking, they'll tap you on the shoulder and go, when I was a kid, I used to have Dark Angels.
Yeah.
Oh, so you just sat there for ages going, I don't want to play that stupid game anymore.
Yeah,
and everyone's turning their backs like, can I have a look at your little miniature, man, please?
Yes. Yeah.
Of course.
Are
Yes.
the Dark Angels still around? Do they still have them? Is the Emperor still around?
One of the best ones I've ever come across was Talking Away. And this guy, just very, very, not quite, it was so quiet that everyone could hear it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And it was just like, Games Workshop. Oh, I haven't played Warhammer for so long. Oh, can't get away with them. Oh, no. Waste of money. I play War Machine. It's the same sickness, just different symptoms. Come on.
It's pretty much the same, isn't it? I mean, marginally cheaper with a not quite as developed background. That's pretty much it.
The irony is all of these people pay £60 a go to have the latest Xbox games.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, this is exactly what we were talking about earlier. It's there are people who will spend £50-40 on a ticket to a football game. It's it's different strokes for different folks.
People get the thing; they spend money on the thing that they enjoy. There is as long as nobody's being hurt, please continue.
And also, it requires no justification if it's pleasurable.
No.
Pleasure and beauty are their own arguments. They always have been. They require no grander philosophy. They require no sort of ideological justification. They are their own arguments.
Yeah, completely. There's no reason whatsoever that anyone should ever be made to feel guilty about what they enjoy doing. As I say, as long as nobody's being hurt.
Yes, as long as there's no victim involved.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I don't know. I might be the victim when it comes to Games Workshop and their things. So,
of course, that's a fair point. The relationship we all share to Games Workshop is that of the perpetually abused spouse, isn't it? We keep going back.
Well, I don't know, because Games Workshop recently have got better. I think my relationship with Sega is probably the abusive one.
Although you've just had Sonic Mania, haven't you?
That's true, and that is really good.
One of the biggest differences, though, is you can play Sega on your own.
True enough.
And having to have a partner to play Warhammer stuff, I think, is a really big part of it. I think it's quite a healthy part of it as well, because there are too many things that 14-year-old kids can do sat at home eating their Kool-Aid and 2 donuts while playing computer games, getting their sticky fingers all over the controller and not doing anything. And I think one of the things that I'm seeing with Warhammer at the moment is it's kids meeting up after school and playing against each other on the game table at the shop. And there's an element to that I think needs to be applauded long term.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. And the fact that it's not just inspiring socialization and communication, but also creativity. It's a hobby that rewards inspiration and a degree of diligence as well, because you are going to fail. When you first start doing this hobby, the first miniatures you produce are going to be shit.
Yeah.
Yes.
Always.
And not
universally.
Not just the first ones.
And no, not just the first ones. Quite a few of them after are not going to be that great. It's just the nature of the beast. But it teaches you a degree of patience, and that failing is okay. That's how you learn. That's just how you do it. As long as you don't just do that very postmodern thing of failing once and then throwing it in and not doing it anymore, you will get good. You'll get good, and what's more, you'll develop a relationship with the hobby, with your miniatures, and it will become an art for you. It'll become a craft for you, and then you will derive pleasure from it, which is much deeper and much more resonant than you will many other hobbies, because it does become more than a hobby. Then it actually becomes a part of you. It becomes something that you do and that you enjoy,
and then it becomes a podcast, and then that's it.
And then it becomes a podcast, and that's the thin end of the thick end of the wedge. That's the end. That's spiraling down the abyss. That is into the realm of chaos. That's when you've lost your soul totally and utterly.
And that's when you realise you've made terrible mistakes, terrible decisions.
Awful.
If lost, please return to Games Workshop.
I need that T-shirt, definitely. If lost, please return to the warp. Thank you. I don't tend to stray from it that often, but I do sometimes wander off into the Webway or the realms of Comorrar or somewhere like that, or even sometimes the Elder Craft worlds. Heaven defend.
Just to see what's going on. Hello.
See what's cracking off there.
Okay. You do not want to be going to the Dark Elder City to see what's cracking off.
No, you really do not. Because, I mean, if there's one place in all the Warhammer 40,000 universe that's probably worse than the Realms of Chaos, it's probably Comora.
Let's not go there for cracking off. Now, Dave, I know... Moving on swiftly, I know that you're needing to get away, fella.
I am.
And we're an hour and a half in, so I just want to very much thank you for your story, really. I've really enjoyed listening to how you got into it and all the bits and bobs, and I hope it resonates with some of our listeners.
I really enjoy your Facebook page. It's really good. It's really welcoming. I waste so much time on it now. It's the bane of my absolute life. Half of it is fantastic, and the other half, I just wish it would bugger off and never have been there in the first place.
You know what I really like about the Fluffenhammer Facebook page? It's the fact that it's avoided a lot of the pitfalls that a lot of the sort of and certainly a lot of the Warhammer Games Workshop forums and pages do, which is it's avoided the silliness, the politics, the arguments, and the complaining and all that kind of thing. And it's just fun. It's just silly. It's people like sharing pics of their minis, sharing very silly memes and stories and whatnot, and just having a bit of a laugh with it.
Well, I was actually really impressed with the group this past week. Actually, there was a talk that I can't remember what it was now. It was one of the ones I put up. But there's been loads of different discussions. Is the Elder God of the Dead going to be a good thing for the Eldari race? That type of thing. And every time, for the majority of it, it has been people having discussions. They may not agree with these discussions. They may disagree quite strongly. But everyone's having discussions. They're not calling each other names. They're not calling each other out. And it is brilliant, and I am so pleased with you all. It just makes me really happy to see.
It's a nice thing, isn't it? Especially if you've been used to some of the bigger, wider, the more entrenched forums for this hobby over the last decade or so. Because although a lot of them are, they're very good. The people who run them have done a lot of work trying to make them these hubs of information and discussion for the games. There is this nasty tendency for them to be highly politicized. So you do not just discussions and debates, but arguments. There is a tendency for them to become platforms for complaining about the hobby and about the decisions of Games Workshop in general, and so on and so forth. And the complaining element is something that really puts me off at the moment, because I really right now there is not a great deal to complain about with Games Workshop.
No, but do you think that, although I know we're at sort of hour and 20 minutes in, and to start a new discussion topic might be terrible, but how much do you think that the new attitude of Games Workshop, along with the launch of the 8th edition, how much do you think of that change in their marketing structure has got to do with the change in the attitude of the people that are embracing it? Because I think, from what I've seen recently, is that people are quite happy to talk about new things and to not poo-poo other stuff, because Games Workshop, to a degree, have gone back to basics and gone, I think we might have got a bit too complicated. Why don't we just go back to basics, so you don't have to be a grand Jedi master Games Workshop person with really, really long hair and big boots to sit there and go, well, I can play this. And all the people like me, to be honest with you, with slightly trendy hair and like walking and going, feeling really, really alienated, going, I don't like it here. I think a lot of what you're talking about with regards to attitude has stemmed directly from the source.
I would agree quite a lot, actually.
Yeah,
they've gone, it's okay to be different. It's fine. I mean, one of the beautiful things is they've included 10 million different versions of armor for Space Marines.
Yep.
Rather than just saying, here are 5 different chapters that you can have, they've included so many, you could never do one of each. It would take you forever and a day. And I think that is Games Workshop. I think that's the American influence of Games Workshop coming over here to the UK saying, go. Just do what you want. Take flight. Just buy my stuff. Buy my crack. And, paint it. Buy my paints. Buy my brushes. Buy my crack. Whatever you want to do with it is absolutely fine. And that didn't exist. As little as 3 or 4 years ago, that didn't exist. That was one of the things that used to turn me off from Games Workshop, because they were indoctrinated into their own tiny little tunnel vision of what things ought to be. And if you varied from that, you got, as a painter specifically, you got massively abused.
Pilloried.
Whereas now, you can sort of stray from the lines a little bit, and people go, "That's very clever. How did you do that?" Rather than "That's the wrong shade of grey."
Yeah, it's absolutely encouraged. I mean, if you look at any of the latest codices or army books or whatever, there are entire sections where they give you just tons and tons of different paint schemes, along with attendant background for subsections of the armies. Little subcults of the armies, and that is it is literally giving players license to do whatever they like. Just go and paint them how you want, come up with your own background, make it a creative exercise, and it is throwing the background, it's throwing the cloistered gates of the hobby wide open, and it's saying, look, it's not a religion, okay? We're not going to exclude people based on what their dietary habits are or anything like that. Come in, do what you like. And I love that. I love the inclusion of it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I don't want to get too much into fawning over Games Workshop, because we seem to do that quite a lot recently. But there is a reason for it.
We do, yes, but there's a lot to fawn over.
There really is. But I think there is a much more positive mindset in GW, especially in the fandom going forward. However, that doesn't take away from the fact that the Fluffenhammer group is an amazing group of people, and I'm really pleased with how that's been going. So I think with all that being said, we're going to be saying goodbye to Dave, because I know that he needs to get away. I think what we'll probably do is have a little break, and then me and George will come back, and we'll finish off the show with our spotlights. So,
thank you for letting me on.
Fabulous.
You're more than welcome, sir.
It's absolute pleasure. Absolute pleasure. It was great listening to your story. Really was.
No, it always is. Always is good to hear from you, man.
I like talking.
do you want to give yourself a quick pimping before you head away?
You can look me up for robot stuff on YouTube as SMS number 1, SMSN01. I put a video up today, which is my second channel, which I'm going to start doing some stuff on, called Smodels, SMODLES, where I showed you the diorama for the competition that I'm doing tomorrow.
Brilliant.
And I want to try and keep those two things fairly separate. So my arty stuff's going to be on one channel, and the robots. And if you want to talk robots with me, go to the Transformers YouTube community, or you can catch me on the Fluffenhammer and just say hello. It's all good.
Yeah.
I think if you don't have any problems with it, we might start trying to get your painting videos up onto the main site.
Fine. I only put the first one up today, but go for it.
Excellent stuff.
Depends how much I hate myself tomorrow after.
And welcome back after our short little break. I'm now caffeinating myself. Listen carefully.
Yes, you hear that? That you had to listen very carefully for that, and there will be a test later on. That was a very specific sound.
So we've got 2 more things to do for this month's episode, and those 2 things are very simple. I just want to ask George, so what have you been doing and what have you been playing in the last month since we last recorded?
Oh man, well, as you've probably guessed, given the topic and tone of discussion throughout the podcast thus far, I've been immersed in the Gardens of Father Nurgle. I really have. I purchased for myself the collector's edition of the Death Guard Codex, and I have been poring over it, not just the army list, but the new background, of which there is a wealth. This is, I mean, it has been done before, but not many times. We have had books dedicated to specific subsections of Chaos Forces. Like there was I believe there was a Black Legion Codex supplement back in the beginning of 6th Ed.
Yes.
There were the Khorne Demonkin towards the end of 6th Ed. And of course there was the Wrath of Magnus books towards the end of 7th Ed. But there has been nothing like this. I mean, really, it's a totally new experiment. I've never come across anything like it, where a specific, and I mean a highly specific subsection of the Chaos Forces in 40k has had so much attention paid to it. It's a beautiful, beautiful piece of work. Not only is it a very interesting army in terms of the way it plays and the way it's composed, the way it's put together, but the feeling of the book, the part I like, which is the fluff, it's the soft part, it's the mythology, it's the background, it's the aesthetics. The feeling of the book is great. It's fun, it's well written. Almost all of it is new.
Yes, that's
what's
right
so
here.
cool about it. You've got you've got the established history of the Death Guard, which we all know. But this picks up. This actually gives us so much more on what life is like, for example, on the Plague Planet, where the Legion make their home. It tells us, we've got an entire page here that tells us how big the Legion is now, which is massive, by the way. It's massive. It's much bigger than it used to be. When the Legion was at its full strength back in the Horus Heresy, it's bigger now. Because it's not only are the Death Guard more resilient than they used to be, so killing them is actually really difficult, but they've been swollen by new recruits, by renegades, by new created Plague Marines, Death Guard who have been created from new aspirants. They can do that now. And you've got this entire spread here, which tells you how it's organized, how the Legion is organized, and how Mortarion puts it together into plague companies and sepsis cohorts and maledictum cohorts. It's absolutely wonderful. But not only do you get that, you don't just get the military organization of the Legion. You get details on what life is like on the Plague Planet, like the topography of the Plague Planet, the climates of the Plague Planet, what the different areas of the Plague Planet are like. So basically the Plague Planet is shaped like Barbarous. The Mortarion's original homeworld. It's shaped like Barbarous. So you've got these mountainous areas which are swathed in just the most toxic, diseased storm clouds imaginable. Entire storms of disease, of pure, demonically infested disease, which swathe the towers and the factories and the citadels of the Plague Marines, of the Death Guard. And this is where the Death Guard rule over the populace. And the populace live on the lower levels, and they live in these hideous wastelands of toxic swamps and of barren deserts and of decayed dead cities, and they consist of the diseased and the mutated and the hideous creatures that worship Nurgle and pray to him for relief from their suffering. It's wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful. There are all these wonderful little new details added, like there are new characters for the Death Guard that all they don't just serve battlefield roles, they serve roles within the culture of the Death Guard, and that's the stuff I really like. That's the stuff that really interests me. So, for example, you have these creatures they're called Foul Blightspawn.
Right,
and
okay.
Foul Blightspawn are Plague Marines that are so wretched, that are so disgusting and foul-smelling that even other Plague Marines can't stand them. I mean, just take a moment to think how disgusting that must be. And the best thing about them is when a Plague Marine is so gifted that they become Foul Blightspawn, they go on this special pilgrimage into these plague factories, which are sort of simultaneously temples to Nurgle and manufactorums, where new diseases and new disgusting engines are created, and their bodies are modified so that they have these I'm not kidding, they have churns surgically inserted into their distended bellies so that they can churn and ferment all of the diseases and foul substances and refine them into these big canisters onto their backs, and then they spray them from these nozzles that break from their right arms and test them on the enemy and on whoever's near. I mean, how brilliant is that? How absolutely wonderful is that? Foul Blightspawn. And what's so cool, the miniature actually has these churn handles coming out of its belly. How fantastic is that? I mean, I love it. I absolutely love it.
The thing that's been bandied around a lot that I've noticed about the Death Guard book is, I'm trying to remember the quote entirely. It's something akin to, I've never seen so many words being used to describe something putrid.
Yeah, that is one of the issues that they actually do have. Because Nurgle can be one note in that regard. The creatures of Nurgle can be a little bit one note. So they struggle to... What they're trying to do is provide many and varied and simultaneously interesting ways for describing filth, for something that is utterly disgusting, that is rancid, that is putrid. And they're trying to show you how even something that seems to be quite simple and narrow can actually be really varied and interesting. And they do it really well. And they do it through these new characters. So you've got characters like the Foul Blightspawn, for example, who we've just described. We also have things like the Noxious Blightbringers. And the Noxious Blightbringers are these particular types of plague marines who they enjoy the psychological aspects of Nurgle's favour more than the physical aspects. So they enjoy seeing despair. They enjoy seeing suffering.
Right. Okay.
And these guys... They also have these special pilgrimages that they go on, where they go into these particular temples where these sort of Nurgle blessed bells are forged. They're not just physical, these bells. They're warp crafted. So when they peal, they don't just spread sound, they spread despair and fear.
I like that. I like that a lot.
It's great, isn't it? They spread a sense of anxiety and paranoia, and they have these bells grafted onto these immense horny growths that sprout from their backs. Mm-hmm. So when they walk, when they move, these bells peal, and they spread anxiety and despair and fear across the battlefield, and also throughout their fellows. But their fellows love it. Their fellows are actually enervated by it, whereas the foes of Nurgle, those not touched by Nurgle's blessing, are actually drained by it.
That I like, because that's that's one of those things. It's built into real science. There is sounds that make you feel uneasy.
Yes, there are actually sounds that make you feel fear and despair, aren't there? There are resonances that make you feel fear and despair. That is actually isn't it one of the parapsychological theories relating to ghost sightings and whatnot?
Yeah. There's an actual name for it.
Yeah, it's like a particular pitch
it's not coming
sound that makes human beings feel fear and anxiety, and can even, if it's sustained, can make them hallucinate.
Yes, yeah. There is sounds that can make you hallucinate. It's a certain sort of pitch. I can't remember if it's pitch or the frequency. I think it's a certain frequency that, if delivered, a certain tone delivered at a certain frequency, that can make you hallucinate and can bring on massive waves of anxiety and nausea.
Yeah,
it's this bell, isn't it?
Yeah, that's exactly what this. I think that's more or less what this was inspired by. You have things like the Biologous Putrefiers. I mean, the names of these things are brilliant. The names of these things are absolutely brilliant. And the Biologous Putrefiers, they have a very unique mutation gifted to them by Nurgle. They sprout all manner of cataracted eyes all over their bodies, eyes like boils, basically. And what the eyes allow them to do, they allow them to see how a disease or infection cultivates inside the bodies of those that they infect. So their purpose is they actually work in conjunction in the same factories with the Foul Blightspawn, the guys with the churns in their bellies. They take the stuff, the raw effluence and diseased muck that is cultivated and fermented inside the Foul Blightspawn's bodies, and they refine it, and they turn it into blight grenades. They turn it into grenades, and they pump it into death's heads and into delivery systems, essentially, which they then hang on their backs on these elaborate structures of bone so they can carry them into battle. And the plague marines that are walking alongside them can pluck the bells and the death's heads and the vials from their backs and chuck them into the enemy. And then the Biologous Putrefier can watch, they can look at the enemy, and they can see how these new creations work.
Mm-hmm.
How cool is that? I mean, it's wonderful.
It's a ton of imagination working behind the engine here. And I like the fact that you can feel it. You can feel it chugging away.
It's great, isn't it? And it gives you some insight to how they work, into how they function actually on the plague planet. You know, it's not just on the battlefield. This a lot of the detail here is domestic. A lot of it is actually domestic. It's telling you how they live. How they actually live on the plague planet. I mean, this is great. This is one of my favorite things. In fact, I'm making this my fluff piece for this podcast, actually, because we're going so deep into it. May as well be. The plague surgeons. The plague surgeons are essentially So the cool thing about the plague surgeons is because the Death Guard don't need apothecaries anymore, because any wounds they sustain are essentially healed over by pus and by flab and by their diseased effluence. Either that or they just don't care. No wound can actually put them down. The plague surgeons do something very different. They actually tend to the diseases that are inside the plague marines. They make sure that the plague marines and their fellows are operating at a healthy level of disease and infection. And if they don't have enough, if they're not deemed to be diseased enough, then the plague surgeons open their own bodies and inject them with their own blood and their own filth, because the bodies of the plague surgeons have become basically the hives and the hosts of the worst, most rancid diseases imaginable. The worst, which is really cool. But there's something even better than that. They don't just tend to the physical needs of the plague marines. They tend to their spiritual needs as well. So they will go around and they will listen to the plague marines, depending on what they did, what they want to say. So some plague marines are absolutely lunatic. They're actually fevered, or their brains are rotted to such a degree that they just ramble nonsense. And the plague surgeons will listen to them. And they will act sort of like armchair psychiatrists and go, yep, interesting, and comfort them and they will actually reinforce them in their delusions and in their fever and call it holy and call it wonderful. There's one, Mortarion has his own personal plague surgeon by the name of Nauseous Rotbone, who sits there and listens to Mortarion rant and rave and spell out his grandiose plans for infecting the entire universe, while Mortarion is in these deliriums when he is communing with Nurgle and with the other demons in the garden of Nurgle. Nauseous Rotbone sits there and listens to him and records it and goes, yes, very interesting, my lord. Yes, rather. That is very interesting indeed. Tell me about your father. How cool is that?
I am loving the idea that Mortarion has a Sigmund Freudian.
It's so cool. I love it. I love it to absolute bits. I can't get enough. I mean, and I think that this is the end. Don't worry, I'm not going to go too far. But the last character that they've added to the Death Guard is the Tallymen. And the Tallymen, they just as the plague surgeons are the equivalents of apothecaries, the Tallymen are the equivalent of chaplains or of dark apostles. And the Tallymen, you know how Nurgle's sacred number is 7?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Well, one of the things they've introduced, one of the new elements of the Death Guard they've introduced, is that the Death Guard, they don't just utilize the number 7 in all of their rituals and whatnot. They are absolutely obsessed by it. Like, myopically, manically obsessed by the number 7.
Right.
Such that they will, like, if they see 7 flies flying in the air in formation, they will take it as an omen or something, and will start a war on the basis of it. There's actually a lovely little bit of background in here. You know Inquisitor Grey?
Yes.
There's a lovely little throwaway bit of fluff in here where she actually baits the Death Guard into a trap by using the number 7.
Oh, that's cool. So they become blinded by it almost.
Yeah, they are absolutely obsessed with it. And Mortarion is the worst by all accounts. He is completely myopically, manically obsessed by the number 7. The Tallymen are the chaplains who basically, they promulgate the faith of the number 7. They are obsessed with it, but they're also the keepers of the most profane secrets of the Death Guard. They're the ones that Mortarion has entrusted with the sort of like the greatest secrets he knows about the Garden of Nurgle, about the faith of Nurgle. They're the ones that promulgate it to the others. And they also act as keepers of records. So like the Plague Bearers, you know how Plague Bearers count everything? Yeah. The Tallymen do exactly the same thing. They emulate the Plague Bearers, but they will obsessively try to sort of separate everything they count into integers of 7. Or into multiples of 7. They're absolutely crazy. But the Death Guard find this very inspiring by all accounts, because they actually, as they're tallying, they bellow out all the things that they're counting and they broadcast it out. And sometimes, if they're very lucky, it can actually act as a kind of chant or as a kind of mantra, and it can separate the veil of reality and call the demons of Nurgle through. Or it can induce blessings. It can draw Nurgle's eye and induce profuse blessings upon the followers
That's
of Nurgle.
awesome. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's so cool, isn't it? It's so cool. The best thing about the talisman, the model for him has a little abacus. I know, I love it. I absolutely love it. What's really cool is, well, they have a function to perform beyond just being chaplains and sort of spiritual wardens on the Plague Planet. Mortarion has entrusted them with the codes and the sort of the secret chants that open the locks on the temples where he keeps the most virulent plagues and the most powerful weapons that the Death Guard have. So the lords of the Death Guard have to petition them to get to these weapons, and often, by all accounts, the price that they have to pay is fairly terrible. So that's kind of cool. They hold a lot of power on the Plague Planet.
It sounds like the entire Death Guard has been taken down to its bare essentials and rebuilt from ground up.
Yeah, that's pretty much
what
they've done.
Isn't a bad thing, because they don't sound as much as, they're Chaos Marines who are just for Nurgle.
Mm-hmm. No, they're not that at all. They've got their own character. Like, do you remember the Death Shroud?
Yes,
have you ever heard of the Death Shroud? They're the Terminator elite that Mortarion used to keep as bodyguards when he was mortal back in the Horus Heresy days, right? Well, they still exist. They still exist. They're these Terminators in cataphracti armor, but they don't act as bodyguards for him anymore because he doesn't need one.
No, he does not.
He's a demon prince. What does he have to fear? So what they act as now is enforcers.
Right.
They will appear in the armies of Death Guard champions and Death Guard lords, and very often they can turn the tide of battle. They are very significant. But a Death Guard champion or lord who they appear to will be immediately terrified by all accounts, because they will be expected to perform, because they're the eyes and the ears of Mortarion. They enforce his will across the field of battle. So a champion who comes under their eye, they will protect him with their lives. They will hurl themselves in front of bullets and laser blasts, but he'd better do what Mortarion wants, and he'd better perform well. Otherwise, after battle, they will kill him. They will lop his head off, and it's an ignominious end. You will not get a good place in the Garden of Nurgle if you die that way, I can tell you.
That's a really cool idea. It gives Mortarion a more all-watching view, doesn't it? It makes him seem less like I'm trying to go, like a comically bad guy, and more of a watchful, paranoid shaman.
Oh, he's definitely that. In that, they've really gone to town on that in this. His legion is well organized. They're not chaotic at all. The Death Guard, like not classically chaotic. They're not like, say, the World Eaters, which are just not organized. They're like separate war bands fighting all over the place, just for whatever, just for the price of being able to take skulls. They don't care. The Death Guard are highly organized, and Mortarion, no matter how far flung they are from him and from the Plague Planet, he coordinates every single one of them.
That's
every single one of them, including Typhus. Including Typhus. You know how they don't like one another? They don't get on. While that fluff has been advanced a little bit now, they still don't like one another. They haven't retconned that. But what they've said is that Mortarion did not want to make the same mistakes with Typhus as the Emperor made with him.
Oh, that's cool.
Isn't that cool? So he let him go. Yeah. He actually let him secede from the Death Guard with a cohort of the Death Guard in sway, so that he could forge his own destiny in the universe. And as a result, they don't like one another, but there is this grudging loyalty between them, such that if Mortarion calls Typhus to fight for the Death Guard, he'll come. He probably won't like it, but he'll come.
Do you know what that makes me think of? The letting Typhus go like that makes Mortarion feel a little bit like Grandpappy Nurgle himself. That he very much becomes an extension of Nurgle, the loving grandfather who will allow you to make your own mistakes, your own choices, and it very much ties it. He, for all intents and purposes, is doing what the Emperor did, but better as well.
Yeah, I know that. So he's actually allowing his sons to make their own mistakes, and it's working. It's working because Typhus still comes. I mean, and Typhus doesn't like him. Typhus doesn't get on with Mortarion. He hates the fact that Mortarion shaped the Plague Planet to look like Barbarous. He hates it. He thinks that it's sentimental, and he hates the fact that Mortarion is way more passive than he is. You know, the difference between them, Mortarion is the slow waxing fever, the epidemic, yeah? Typhus is the pandemic. Typhus rages. He is the pandemic that sweeps through nations and just obliterates them. Whereas Mortarion is the slow build. That's the difference between them. And it's really cool because it gives you some depth as to how Nurgle operates and how Nurgle forces can operate in the wider universe. It's really cool. I love it.
I do need to start getting hold of the codexes.
Oh, you so do, because there's so much. I mean, if this is an indicator of what they're going to do with each of the cult legions, I cannot wait to see the characters that they introduce into the World Eaters and into the Emperor's Children and the Thousand Sons. I mean, you can sort of see, if you look at the stuff that's established in the background, you can see what might be included. Like, for example, when the World Eaters Codex comes out, and it will come out, it will come, it won't be for a while, but it will come, there will be Berserker Surgeons. There will be. You know, the ones who are responsible for implanting the Butcher's nails? We know they exist in the background. We know they exist in the background because they've been talked about before, but they've never been in the game. If this book is anything to go by, they'll be in it. Isn't it cool?
It just ties into what you were saying earlier about the Horus Heresy books being the catalyst and jumping off point for the design of the universe as it stands now.
Yeah, I mean, it's invested. I mean, really, because of those books and because of the expansions in the background, the armies can't function as they used to anymore. You can't have, like, all of the Chaos Space Marines operating out of a Chaos Space Marine Codex. There's just too much. There's too much. I mean, having the Chaos Space Marine Codex that exists is brilliant. Don't get me wrong, it's really good. But I imagine as time goes on, you're going to start seeing codices coming, or at least supplements coming for each of the legions. I think they'll probably even do it with the Undivided legions eventually. The Black Legion will definitely get one. There's no doubt in my mind the Black Legion will get one. And with it, probably new Chaos Terminators, new Chosen, new Abaddon. That wouldn't surprise me in the least. The cult legions are, well, it's barring Games Workshop going under or something, it's an absolute cert. It's an absolute cert. Perturabo and the Iron Warriors, they'll come. Lorgar and the Word Bearers, they'll get their own codex eventually.
Imagine living in a world where you can say those sentences.
I know. Who would have thought that? Like, a year ago, who would have thought that? I wouldn't. I certainly wouldn't. I was still festering at that point. I was still a little bit. I was into the hobby, but I was like, I was an embittered Chaos player at that point. The status we're operating under now, where, quite frankly, we've got the best codex, the best core codex has been released thus far, and we've also got this spin-off codex, which is its own thing, and is probably one of the best codices that's ever been released ever.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. I never would have thought this. This Death Guard Codex, although I don't even collect Death Guard, represents everything I want.
A huge amount, that engine of imagination just being poured into it, things being tied together, things being brought up from, at this point in time, 6-7 years ago in a Horus Heresy book.
Yeah, it's just everything I desire from this hobby is in these books now, and it's inspiring, and it makes me want to go and buy stuff. Games Workshop, it really does.
Yeah, that's a sore point.
Yeah. Well. To be fair, Adam, you've got some way more important things to be buying stuff than miniatures.
Well, that's very true. This doesn't stop me, actually. So moving on to something I wanted to quickly bring up before we get going onto my spotlight. Mm-hmm. So thanks to the Fluffenhammer group and Robert Bateman in particular, I got a package. Oh. And it was some White Dwarfs.
Oh.
It starts at, hang on, how about issue 97, which has Brian Ansell and Bob Naismith reveal their plans for injection-molded futures. David Langford's Book of the Months. That's right, Dave Langford writing for White Dwarf.
Wow.
But that's not the earliest one. Let's go a little earlier. How does that sound? Let's go to, how about issue 90, which is the 10 Years of White Dwarf magazine. So there's all sorts of stuff in here. The comic about some goblins, some Warhammer Fantasy Battle stuff. But let's go further back than that, eh? Let's just keep going back. How about issue 52?
Oh my god.
So, issue 52, April 1984.
Oh god, I wasn't even one.
Yeah, I was 3.
I wasn't even one. I was born in February 1984.
Yeah, this is incredible. It has the original talisman in it.
Jesus.
Battle cards, Lost Worlds, Dragon Riders of Pern game.
Oh my, Dragon Riders of Pern game and McCaffrey.
Yeah.
Wow.
Rogue Trader is on its way.
It hasn't even been released yet. The
No.
first edition of 40k. Wow.
And then it goes right the way up, 241. And this one is from... There we go. Yes, 98. So this is January 1998 is the last one.
That was my Christmas present that year.
Was it?
Yeah, the big Warhammer 40,000 box set that had Space Marines and Dark Elder in it.
Do you want to know the thing that's going to make you really sick?
Go on.
So, out of all these, I've discovered some bits. So, I've put together all the card inserts. Because all of the card inserts were there.
Oh, wow.
You know that you were saying earlier on about the White Dwarf that had a metal Necron attached to the front?
I do, yes.
Yeah, it's still got the metal Necron attached to the front.
No way. Little lead metal Necron. Brilliant. Has he still got the spiky gun?
Oh, yeah. There's a plastic Dark Elder attached to the front. And at the, another issue. And at the moment, I'm currently painting up a Chaos Sorcerer that was attached to the front of another issue.
Oh, I think I remember that one too. I think I had that one.
Yeah. So, oh man, it's there's a Bretonian, there's a skink, there's
a Bretonian. God, I remember them.
Oh yeah, there's so much stuff, and I haven't even I haven't even scratched the surface of what's in most of these issues yet. But I just wanted to say thank you to Robert Bateman and to the Hobbit Hole for sending this over. This is going to keep me going for months.
Yeah, that is brilliant.
It is. It really is. It's something incredible. Something else entirely.
I mean, did you used to do that thing? I was a very obsessive child about things. I would have fads on things that would be like just religious, essentially fanatical. And I used to carry White Dwarfs around with me pretty much anywhere, to the point whereby the paint on the cover would wear away.
I'm going to tell you a story. A story I don't think I've ever told anybody. You've got to keep it a secret, George.
Yes, just us and whoever listens to this podcast, yeah?
So in 1994, my dad was working in Alain. Mm-hmm. So, we'd lived out in Sharjah, so we travelled out for 6 weeks. Because I knew we were going to be in Alain for 6 weeks, my suitcase took every single issue of White Dwarf that I had. To the detriment of clothes. Which I may have decided to leave some behind, so I could take more issues of White Dwarf.
Well, priorities, you get your priorities straight as a kid.
Oh yeah, so I had to buy clothes when we were out there. So yeah, that answers your question, I think. So, yes, so I just wanted to quickly say that. And then, finally then for tonight, to finish up then, my spotlight. And I have something for you this evening, which is large. It's green, and it's amphibious.
Ooh.
But it's
Getting
not.
Slaneshi again. It always happens, doesn't it, Yuzu?
Well, you got the first half of the name right, because I'm going to talk to you about the Slan.
Oh, this is a good topic, Adam. This is a big one.
It is, because you will say to yourself, the Slan? The Slan from Age of Sigmar? Do you mean the large frog things that travel through space above the realms in their weird spaceships, and they've got the ability to bring memories of lizard men and skinks down from their spaceships into the mortal realms? And I'll say no. No, but they do exist.
Oh, yes, they do.
And then you'll say to me, but Adam, then you must be talking about the Slan as in the giant sleeping frogs who live in Lustria with names like Quasicotl. And I swear to you, all these names are real, and I've taken them from actual things. Or Cupacoca, or Pina Colada.
Strawberry Daiquiri.
Milk Bottle. And Croak. And Croak still exists.
Croak does still exist,
Croak
and there's
does.
even a mini.
Yep, there is. And the ones that have got this giant plan in action, who will try to stop chaos. And I'll say no, because they don't just try to stop chaos, because chaos is their fault.
Yep.
In the fantasy world, because you see, they did little things like they tried to shift the continents around to make it slightly better for them, and in doing so, they shattered the Dwarf Empire and let the Skaven and Orcs come out.
Mm-hmm. Got a lot to answer for, those bloody frogs.
Yeah, or, what about the time when they released all that magic into the air? Oh, I'll say yes, I remember that time. That's the one that decimated the elven lands and caused them to move into 3 separate races, the Wood Elves, High Elves, and Dark Elves, and powered up the Dark Elves, gave them the ability to go out and hurt everybody with whips and frog creatures that they ride around. Getting a little deep cutty there, I realise. And then you might say to me, but they're not bad, they had that great plan. And I'll say, really? How good did their great plan go? Because, the world blew up.
Yeah, they did really well with that one, didn't they?
No. But at least they stopped chaos in their tracks by pushing the realm of chaos back. And I'll say, actually, no. You see, they opened up the warp gates and brought chaos into the world. It's their fault. And
it's their fault.
It's entirely their fault. And then you might say to me, but alright then, so you've said all that, so why are you going to talk about them? And I'll say, well, there's slang that you may not know about.
Mm-hmm.
If we go way, way back to Warhammer Fantasy Battle, and I'm talking the original, and Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, the Slan were not, as you may think, giant frog people. They were human-sized frog people. There were, as far as the eye could see, an entire race of frog people, and they had a strangely Napoleonic look to them. And it kind of concerns me that Games Workshop thought that giving frogs a French uniform is a thing that's worth doing. I might be alone there, I don't know. But they were a really interesting race back then, because they were very much a precursor to what the Slan were, as I say, amphibious frog people, and they were led by much bigger amphibians. There was no lizard men, no skinks, nothing like that. Everything amphibious. And their entire point was to be the ultimate soldiers of order. They were there to push back chaos in every form. So the idea of them was that they were an army. So I'll stop and see if this sounds familiar to you. They appeared out of nowhere when chaos threatened to overwhelm somewhere, and they went into attack, and they pushed it back, and then eventually, once that battle was over, they would vanish. Suddenly the Seraphon don't seem so bad, do they? Because it's actually tying into the original Slan mythology.
Yeah.
And I find that a really strange thing. I mean, it's not a one-to-one analogue, but it's not far
clever,
away.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
They are. It's just got little echoes and little resonances with the original background.
And that I found quite interesting. So
it's opening up a can of worms, isn't it, really? I mean, it could potentially be very interesting, introducing notions of there being spirits of order, as well as there being spirits of chaos. I mean, they could extend that massively. You could eventually have gods of order.
Well, we did. Do you remember the Chaos Gods of Order?
I do. I can't remember their names, but
wasn't
one of them
Ulrich,
called... Yeah. Oh, yes, Ulrich. Yes.
All of the gods are...
Although, weren't they revealed as just being, like, adjuncts to the Chaos powers, ultimately?
Well, much later on, they kind of got redone to be either faces of Sigmar or alternative aspects of various Chaos powers.
Chaos powers,
it's like Moore is, in fact, Nurgle. And...
No, Moore is Nurgle, isn't he?
Yes,
yeah, that's right.
Ulrich was Khorne. It's just one of those. But there was loads of different Chaos Gods. I think it's Shalaya.
Yeah, there was also one called Mork, who is Morcock, I believe. Yeah.
There was another one. There was an actual 5th Chaos God, and I can't remember what his name was now.
Malal,
that's the one.
Who was the Chaos God of Contradiction.
Yes.
He was the Chaos power that hated chaos.
Yeah. Which in itself is a contradiction. Hang on. Was he actually Alanis Morissette, the chaos god of ironic?
Oh, good God. Ugh.
And I like the fact that still nobody realises that the song is called Ironic because it's ironic that nothing in that song's ironic.
Yes, yeah.
It's
like irony that comes back round and becomes non-irony again. It becomes earnest again.
Which is kind of the point of... Anyhow, moving on.
Yeah. Do you know that Malal still exists in the background?
I didn't actually.
Yeah, they can't call him Malal anymore because the guy who came up with Malal doesn't work for Games Workshop anymore, and it's his copyright. So they call it Malice now.
Ah, yes, I have seen the name Malice kicking around. I didn't realise it was actually the same as Malal. That's cool.
It's Malal, yeah. And there's even a Chaos Space Marine Renegade chapter called The Sons of Malal that have the same symbology and colours as the original champions of Malal, bisected black and white with a skull rune.
That's quite cool. I like that.
It's quite fun, isn't it?
Yeah. But the entire reason I brought up the slam is I've got an issue with the current Seraphon, the lizard men. It doesn't work for me at all. No. There's a giant contradiction. Well, not a contradiction, that's the wrong word. But there's a giant gulf between the miniatures on the table and the fiction as it stands.
Oh, they look nothing like how they're supposed to be. They're supposed to be ethereal, aren't they? They're supposed to be like intangible almost, like spirits.
Yeah.
Star spirits, essentially. Mm-hmm. And they don't look like that.
Well, the battle tome for Seraphon gives you the idea that they are going to look ethereal. Inside Pestilence, they are solid. They are skin and they are blood. Yeah. They just kind of get resurrected. Mm-hmm. And it brought me to an idea, a thought of, what if on those spaceships, instead of there being banks, like memory banks of the Seraphon that they can just appear from, what if they had sections of the old world that they could just reach into and pull out various forms of things? So...
Oh, that'd be so cool.
Yeah. So I kind of like that idea. And that idea started trundling along. And then I started thinking, hang on, I can fix the Seraphon. And that is, we stop using the lizard men. Right? Mm-hmm. You can keep the ideas of cold ones and all that type of thing, and you could have lizard men, thing, but it needs a complete new miniature from scratch. It needs to be built up. But then I started thinking about the original slam.
The frogs.
And just replacing all of that with, various, everything that's lizard man, replacing it with frog people. And then the more I thought about it, the more I quite liked the idea. Because you start making these frog people look like they fit a bit more with the Age of Sigmar aesthetic, so it's a bit more ridiculous, a bit more out there, a bit more prog metal, rock, sorry. The idea just flicked in my head. Hang on, that's it, isn't it? You make frog people, you make them armoured to hell, right? And you have the Seraphon work, because now they look... these things just appear out of nowhere and they attack and they are the chaos gods of order. They don't look like anything that's existed before. Go frog people. And the more I thought about it, the more I really liked the idea. And I kind of wish that that's what they'd gone with. And then I played against some Seraphon and went, yep, these just don't work for me at all.
Yeah.
It'll please you to know that Seraphon ate Lord Croak. The Drakenfels ate Lord Croak, and I was rather pleased with that response. So that's my spotlight. I recommend you go back and have a look at the original Slan.
Yeah, Slan are really interesting in the hinterlands of Games Workshop lore and fluff.
Yeah. The original Slan hold the same places like the original, the Thimir and the Zotes and all that type of thing.
The stuff that's gone, the stuff that's not in the universe anymore. I mean, they exist like very vaguely, don't they? Like they're referred to as the old ones in 40k.
Yes, yeah. They made the orcs.
They were essentially the first sentient race, weren't they?
Yeah. And they in 40k they had laser guns and still had Napoleonic clothing.
I mean, actually, the funny thing about them is that a lot of the races they purportedly created certainly look a lot more advanced than they ever did.
Yeah, which is...
Like the Eldar, for example.
Which is a really strange one, but they kind of get thought of now as being these amorphous, floating clouds, don't they?
They're way more abstract now. I mean, the old ones are never described as like a race in the background anymore, but they are a race that's more spiritual, I suppose, more abstract. They've evolved to a state where they're not even physical forms anymore.
The Vorlons,
yeah, essentially that. They're like They are just abstract entities, aren't they? Clouds of ideas and inspirations and whatnot.
Yeah.
That fight wars, bizarrely.
Yeah, because that's what you have to do when you think about stuff.
They fight with the Necron Tire, who become the Necrons, and they create lots of races to fight their wars for them.
Including the Orcs.
Including the Orcs, yes.
That went well for you. But, just the idea of the original slam. A weird thought occurred to me when I was sort of looking it up, sort of reminding myself a lot about the slam. Isn't it strange that the stuff that really doesn't exist in Games Workshop anymore is the most original stuff that they did?
I suppose that is kind of ironic, isn't it?
Yeah, it's an odd one that in Fantasy Battle that it kind of, every time it tried to break out of that Germanic medieval Europe with fantasy tropes attached to it, it kind of got pulled back in.
Yeah,
so
it never really worked, did it?
No, it's an odd one that all this stuff that they came up with didn't stick, whilst all the Tolkien stuff with the Moorcock hat stayed. I don't know, I just find it really weird. It'd be interesting to try and talk to somebody like Brian Ansell to find out why that was the case, why stuff that they created that was not typical fantasy genre stuff got jettisoned.
Yeah, I mean, that may have been a conscious thing. I mean, that may be a market-driven thing. Or it may not have been conscious. It may just have been the natural way of the market, that people just reacted better to the stuff that they knew, the Tolkienite stuff, which is the very core of the fantasy battle, or at least it was. I mean, they're moving away from that significantly now, making it more their own thing. It's moving now more into realms of steampunkery and very abstract fantasy, very sort of hallucinogenic fantasy.
So I had a conversation the other day which I found quite interesting, that somebody was saying, Age of Sigmar is a good game, but there isn't a huge amount of story to it. And then I started thinking about it and went, actually, yes, there is. Because if you think about the evolution of what's happened since Age of Sigmar hit, you've had the hunt for Gal Maraz, the hunt for Nagash, and this is just using the campaign stories, You had them, you had, what's the one that came after the Realmgate Wars, God Beasts, Blight War, you've got the Firestorm thing coming up. That's
there's actually quite a lot, isn't there? There's actually a lot more than you think there is.
Once you start kind of decompressing it and thinking about how much story has actually happened since the Age of Sigmar launched, there's actually probably about half the amount that there was over 30 years of Warhammer Fantasy Battle.
Yeah, because it moves faster. That's the thing about it. It moves a lot faster. It's less monolithic.
Yeah, completely. Which I found really interesting.
I do too. And also you find that things actually do change. Like Giran, I don't know how many times that's changed hands.
Yeah, I
mean, it was under the sway of Alariel, then it was under the sway of Nurgle, now it's under the sway of Zeech, I do believe.
Yep, I think Sigmar's taken it back now.
Oh, has he?
Yeah.
So Sigmar has it now. That's interesting.
At some point, I'm going to try and start to go with the Mapping the Mortal Realms videos and the Suffer Not the Alien to Live videos. I'm going to try and do a series of videos that is the beginning of the Age of Sigmar story going forward.
Yeah, so, that's a good idea, just to give like a roadmap for where it's going and whatnot.
I need to pick up some more books to be able to do that, because there's actually a lot more than you think. It's ridiculous.
Yes, there is actually a fairly decent library of Age of Sigmar books, and they all tie together. That's what's interesting. They actually do feed together, so really to get the complete picture, you do need them all. You do.
And then at some point, there's going to be that Warhammer Age of Sigmar Fantasy Battle RPG coming out.
Yeah, which I imagine will be really interesting. I wouldn't mind picking that up myself.
I just know there's going to be a giant chapter on things like Excelsis, which means I'm going to have to rewrite entire videos. Yay!
But it's so interesting, isn't it, to see Games Workshop doing role-playing systems again. They've gone right back, full circle, right back to their roots.
Yeah, and if nothing else, even if I never play the RPG itself, there's going to be a ton of background in there that I can use.
Do you know what we could do? We could do a campaign via this.
We could, yes.
We could do an RP campaign. I think that would be great fun.
I have done an RPG over Skype before, and it had some issues, but it was good fun. There's
lots of programs you can get out there, actually, that you can sort of use to make it easier, you know?
Yeah, you can get like a dice rolling thing. To give you an idea how long ago it was where I tried to do an RPG over Skype, there was nothing, and I had to go and trust that people were telling me what their dice rolls were.
Oh God! So you couldn't even see.
No, couldn't even see.
Oh man, that's so abusable, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
That's so beautifully abusable.
Be about 8 years ago. But anyhow, I think that we are now out of time.
Yeah, so my cat is now insisting that I pay attention to her. So
yeah, I've got the same issue going on outside my office. So, so with all that being said, then thank you very much, George, for joining us.
As always a pleasure. Always. I always find something to enjoy in these podcasts.
Oh yeah. Very much so. And thank everyone at home. I know this has been a bit of a strange, rambly one. We've been hit by all sorts of technical issues and cat-based interruptions throughout the night.
Largely cat-based.
So I apologise if it seems a bit rambly, but I hope that you've enjoyed yourselves. I really do. We will be back at the latest in a month's time. Hopefully we'll get together before that and do something small with just me and you. We'll see how it goes.
Sounds good.
But I've got somebody ready and willing in the wings for the next full-blown episode, which I'm looking forward to.
Brilliant stuff. So
before we get away then, is there anything you'd like to pimp out, Mr. George?
As always, you can find my fiction over at strangeplaygrounds.com. You can find a lot of my articles and essays on thegingernutsofhorror.com. And you can also find my rambly videos on everything ranging from fiction to Warhammer to philosophy at Exaggerated Elegy on YouTube.
I do like the fact that gingernutsofhorror.com sounds like it's a pun.
It does, doesn't it? It's
but
great.
It's not. At all.
It's not.
No.
Not at all. No. And what's really fun about it, it's actually one of the bigger independent horror websites on the internet. Mm-hmm. And it has a name like gingernutsofhorror.com, which I think is fabulous.
Because you've got to take even the worst experiences with a smile.
Absolutely, yes. And a ginger nut makes everything.
Oh yeah, it does. It really does. As long as there's a cup of tea involved. As for myself, you can find me at Grufflock on YouTube, where you can find all of my videos. You can find these shows at thefluffenhammer.weebly.com and on theoldoilhouse.co.uk. You can also find me at gruffnexus.weebly.com, where I have even more stuff, and you can find all my audiobooks that I'm currently working on at rivetedsounds.co.uk. I am being stared at now by a cat that has snuck into the room very quietly, and I was a little surprised to see him there. I don't actually know how he did it. Which I think is the universe telling me it's time to say goodnight. So with that, good night, everybody.
Ta-ta, ladies and gentlemen.